Tanks, trucks, Katyushas, and more. These are the Soviet machines that rolled, fought, and crushed the Nazi war machine. From the frozen steppes to the gates of Berlin, every vehicle played its part in the Great Patriotic War. Let's begin with tanks. T-26 light tank. Before the war, the T-26 was the backbone of Soviet armor. Based on a British design, it was lightly armored and armed with a 45mm gun. By 1941, it was hopelessly outmatched, but thousands still fought desperately in the opening months of Operation Barbarossa. BT-7 fast tank. Built for speed over armor, the BT-7 could reach 53 miles per hour on roads and even run on wheels without its tracks. Its mobility made it dangerous in skilled hands, but thin armor meant German anti-tank guns tore through it with ease. T-34 medium tank, the legend. With sloped armor that deflected German shells and a 76mm gun that could punch through most Panzers, the T-34 shocked the Wehrmacht. Over 84,000 were built, and it became the icon of Soviet armored might, serving from Moscow to Berlin. T-34-85. Recognizing the need for a bigger punch, Soviet engineers upgraded the T-34 with an 85mm gun in 1944. The improved turret gave crews more space and better optics, transforming an already legendary tank into a war winner. T-60 light tank. A rushed wartime design, the T-60 was small, simple, and cheap to produce during the desperate days of 1941. Armed with just a 20mm cannon, it was cannon fodder against German armor, but served as infantry support and reconnaissance. T-70 light tank. An improvement over the T-60, the T-70 featured better armor and a 45mm gun. Over 8,200 were produced. While it couldn't stand toe-to-toe with Panzers, it provided crucial mobile firepower for Soviet infantry. KV-1 heavy tank. When German troops first encountered this monster in 1941, they panicked. Armor so thick that 50mm shells simply bounced off. A single KV-1 famously held up an entire German division. It was Stalin's steel wall on tracks. KV-2. Take a KV-1 chassis and mount a bunker-busting 152mm howitzer in a massive box turret. The result was impractical, top-heavy, and absolutely terrifying. Designed to demolish Finnish fortifications, it became an icon of Soviet heavy firepower. IS-1 heavy tank. The first of the Joseph Stalin series, the IS-1 arrived in 1943 with thick armor and 85mm gun. It was designed specifically to counter German Tigers and Panthers, bringing Soviet heavy armor back into the fight. IS-2 heavy tank, the beast that rolled into Berlin. Armed with a massive 122mm gun that could penetrate any German armor, the IS-2 was revenge on tracks. Its appearance in 1944 signaled the end for the Third Reich. IS-85. A stopgap measure between the KV and IS series, the KV-85 mounted the improved 85mm gun in the KV chassis. Limited numbers were produced, but it helped bridge the gap until heavier tanks arrived. Now let's look at tank destroyers and assault guns. Su-76, the most produced Soviet armored vehicle after the T-34. This light self-propelled gun mounted a 76mm gun on a lengthened T-70 chassis. Crews called it the bitch for its thin armor, but it provided critical fire support throughout the war. Su-85. Built on the T-34 chassis with a fixed superstructure, the Su-85 was a dedicated tank hunter. Its low profile and powerful 85mm gun made it deadly in ambush, destroying German armor before they even knew what hit them.
Su-100, the evolution of the Su-85, mounting a devastating 100mm gun. Arriving in 1944, it could engage and destroy Panthers and Tigers from long range. Soviet crews loved it for its hitting power and reliability. Su-122, mounting a 122mm howitzer on a T-34 chassis, the Su-122 was designed for direct fire support. It demolished bunkers and strongpoints, clearing the way for Soviet infantry assaults. Su-152, the Beast Slayer. That's what Soviet crews called this monster. A 152mm gun howitzer on a KV chassis. Panthers, Tigers, Ferdinands, it didn't matter. The Su-152 sent them all to the scrapyard with a single hit. Isu-152, the final evolution. Built on the IS-2 chassis with even heavier armor, the Isu-152 was nearly indestructible. It pulverized German armor and reduced Berlin's buildings to rubble during the final assault. Isu-122, similar to the Isu-152, but armed with a 122mm gun, offering better anti-tank performance and higher velocity. It served alongside the Isu-152 in the final push into Germany. Let's move on to armored cars. BA-10, a pre-war heavy armored car mounting the same 45mm gun as light techs. With decent armor and good speed on roads, it served in reconnaissance roles during the early war before being outclassed. BA-64, the Soviet answer to the Jeep, but armored. Light, fast, and reliable, over 9,000 were produced. It carried scouts, liaison officers, and even served as a light command vehicle throughout the war. BA-64B, an improved version with a wider track base for better stability. It became the standard light armored reconnaissance vehicle, racing ahead of columns to probe German positions. Moving on to half-tracks and carriers. Komsomolets armored tractor, a small, fully tracked artillery tractor designed to tow anti-tank guns. Though lightly armored, it could carry gun crews under protection and proved invaluable in mobile warfare. Universal carrier. Supplied through lend-lease from Britain, these nimble tracked vehicles carried infantry, towed guns, and performed reconnaissance. Soviet troops appreciated their cross-country mobility. M3 Scout Car. American White Scout cars arrived via lend-lease. Wheeled and lightly armored, they served Soviet reconnaissance units and commanders who needed speed over protection. M2 and M3 Halftrack. Thousands of American half-tracks rolled into Soviet service through lend-lease. They carried infantry, towed artillery, and brought American engineering to the Eastern Front. Let's look at rocket artillery. BM-8 Katyusha, the smaller brother of the famous rocket launcher, firing 82mm rockets. Mounted on trucks, it provided devastating barrages that terrified German troops with its distinctive scream. BM-13 Katyusha, the legend. 16 132mm rockets that launched with a shriek Germans called Stalin's organ. The psychological impact was as devastating as the physical destruction. Entire battalions broke and ran at the sound of it. BM-31, the heavy hitter. Mounting larger 300mm rockets, the BM-31 arrived later in the war. It delivered crushing barrages that obliterated German fortifications during the Soviet offensives. Moving on to trucks and transport. GAZ-AA, the Soviet Ford Model A. Over 1 million were built. This simple, rugged truck carried bread, bullets, and bandages to the front. If the T-34 won battles, the AA won the war by keeping armies supplied. The AAA, the six-wheeled version of the AA, offering better load capacity and off-road performance. It hauled artillery, supplies, and served as the base for early Katyusha systems. GAZ-MM, an improved version of the GAZ-AA with a more powerful engine. It served throughout the war in countless roles, from cargo hauler to ambulance to command vehicle. ZIS-5, the 3-ton workhorse. Over 1 million produced. Every Soviet offensive relied on endless columns of ZIS-5 trucks hauling ammunition, fuel, and food to advancing armies. ZIS-6, a heavier 6-wheeled truck designed for artillery towing. It pulled heavy guns through mud, snow, and destruction, ensuring Soviet artillery could always keep pace with the advance.
Studebaker US-6, American lend-lease magic. 152,000 of these rugged 2.5-ton trucks arrived in the USSR. Soviet soldiers loved them for their reliability, comfort, and heaters. They carried Katyushas, supplies, and hopes. Dodge WC series, American 3/4-ton trucks that arrived through lend-lease. They served as weapons carriers, ambulances, and command cars, bringing American engineering to Soviet service. GMC CCKW, the famous deuce and a half. Thousands rolled into Soviet service via lend-lease, providing reliable logistics support with their 6-wheel drive and rugged construction. Willys MB and Ford GPW, the Jeep. Over 50,000 arrived in the Soviet Union. Small, nimble, and capable of going anywhere, they became beloved by Soviet commanders and troops alike. GAZ-67, the Soviet Jeep. Inspired by American designs but built in Soviet factories, the GAZ-67 was rugged, simple, and perfect for reconnaissance and liaison work. It served until the end of the war. GAZ-M1. Based on American designs, this staff car carried Soviet officers in relative comfort. It wasn't armored, but in rear areas it provided reliable transport for commanders. Let's move on to tractors and prime movers. STZ-3, a simple agricultural tractor pressed into military service. It towed artillery, hauled supplies, and rescued stuck vehicles. Unglamorous, but absolutely essential. STZ-5, a heavier artillery tractor that pulled medium and heavy guns through the worst terrain imaginable. Soviet artillery kept moving because tractors like this never stopped. Komintern artillery tractor, a fully tracked prime mover based on a tank chassis. It hauled heavy artillery and anti-aircraft guns, ensuring the big guns could deploy wherever the Red Army needed them. Voroshilovets heavy tractor, the heavyweight champion. This massive tracked vehicle towed the heaviest Soviet guns and could recover disabled tanks. It was named after Kliment Voroshilov, a Soviet military leader. Ya-12 tractor, a diesel-powered artillery tractor that served throughout the war. It was reliable, powerful, and kept Soviet guns mobile even when roads turned to mud. Allis-Chalmers and Caterpillar tractors. American tractors arrived through lend-lease, bringing superior engineering to Soviet artillery and logistics units. They proved remarkably reliable in harsh conditions. Moving on to engineering and recovery vehicles. T-34T, a T-34 modified for recovery work, equipped with towing gear and winches. It braved the front lines to rescue damaged tanks and haul them back to repair depots. KV-T, a KV heavy tank converted into a recovery vehicle. Its immense power could drag even the heaviest disabled vehicles from mud, craters, and battlefields. GAZ-60 armored recovery vehicle. Based on the Komsomolets chassis, this small recovery vehicle supported light tanks and self-propelled guns, providing forward recovery capability. ZIS-5V, a standard ZIS-5 truck equipped with heavy-duty winches and recovery gear. It cleared roads, rescued stuck vehicles, and kept supply columns moving.
BREM T-34, purpose-built tank recovery vehicles based on the T-34 chassis appeared late in the war, featuring cranes and winches to repair and recover armor under fire. Let's look at amphibious vehicles. T-37 and T-38 amphibious tanks, small, lightly armed tankettes that could swim across rivers. By 1941, they were obsolete for combat, but served in reconnaissance and liaison roles. Ford GPA, the American Seep, an amphibious jeep. Hundreds arrived through lend-lease. Soviet troops used them to cross rivers and move supplies where bridges were destroyed. WWII, the famous Duck. This six-wheeled amphibious truck was a logistics miracle, ferrying supplies from ships directly to shore without stopping. Soviet forces used them extensively. LVT-2 Water Buffalo. American amphibious tracked vehicles arrived for Pacific-style operations. Soviet forces used them in river crossings during the final offensives. Now let's cover motorcycles. M72, a Soviet copy of the German BMW R71. Thousands were produced with sidecars, carrying dispatch riders, scouts, and sometimes machine gunners through the chaos of the Eastern Front. Harley-Davidson WLA and Indian 741. American motorcycles arrived through lend-lease. Soviet couriers and MPs used them to maintain communication across vast distances. IZH-7, 8, and 9. Soviet-built motorcycles based on pre-war designs. They were simple, rugged, and kept Soviet armies connected when radio silence was necessary. Finishing off with specialized and command vehicles. BA-20, a light armored car based on the GAZ-M1 chassis. Though limited in protection and firepower, it served in reconnaissance and liaison roles during the early war. FA armored car, an early war design with thin armor and a machine gun turret. It was quickly outclassed, but served in rear area security and scouting operations. ZIS-5 BM-13 platform, the standard Katyusha truck platform. The ZIS-5 six-wheel drive made it ideal for carrying rocket launcher frames across rough terrain. GAZ-AA BM-8 platform, the lighter rocket launcher platform carrying the BM-8 system. It provided mobile firepower that could deploy, fire, and relocate before German artillery could respond. ZIS-5 fuel tanker. Without fuel, every tank becomes a pillbox. These tankers were priority targets, but kept Soviet armor rolling through offensive after offensive. GAZ-AA ambulance. Marked with red crosses, these trucks carried wounded soldiers from frontline aid stations to field hospitals, saving countless lives under fire. Radio trucks. Modified ZIS-5 and GAZ-AA trucks carrying radio equipment coordinated massive operations across hundreds of miles, keeping armies synchronized. Command vehicles. Modified staff cars and trucks fitted with radios and maps allowed Soviet commanders to control operations from positions near the front. GAZ-0330 bus. Civilian buses pressed into military service to move troops, support staff, and equipment between rear areas and forward positions. ZIS-8 bus, a larger bus based on the ZIS-5 chassis, used for troop transport and moving entire units to concentration areas before offensives. From the T-34 that changed armored warfare forever to the humble GAZ-AA truck that kept Soviet armies fed, the Soviet Union threw everything with wheels or tracks into the fight against fascism. Millions of machines, one purpose: victory at any cost. The Great Patriotic War wasn't won by wonder weapons. It was won by an unstoppable industrial avalanche of Soviet steel, determination, and sacrifice.